the front. Welcome, friends. Thank you for coming this evening to Temple Beth Israel's Yom HaShoah Observance. We will begin in about 5 minutes.
Erev Tov and welcome, friends, to this our Temple Beth Israel observance of Yom HaShoah Observance. We find ourselves during that period of time between Pesach and Shavuot that's known as the period of the Omer. So we begin with the counting of the Omer. Inunu muchanim umuzmanim lekayem mitzvat aseh shel sefirat haOmer. We're about to fulfill the mitzvah of the counting of the Omer. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu sefirat haOmer. Hayom 11 yom shehem shavua echad v'arba'a yamim la'omer. Today is the 11th day of the Omer, comprised of 1 week and 4 days. We begin with these words of prayer. Al ha'gvurot v'al ha'tshuot. We give thanks for the enduring courage of our people, for their mighty deeds, for their faithfulness, and for the saving remnant that we recall today. In the days of the great Jewish communities of Europe, evil, embodied in the persons of Hitler and his followers, came to power, seeking to wipe the Jewish people from the face of the earth. But they did not succeed, and in the end, the evildoers were themselves destroyed. And though they killed 6 million of our people, Am Yisrael Chai, the people of Israel lives. As we continue to live, and as we remember what has come before, we dedicate this day to give thanks and praise to you, our God and Sovereign. May you be blessed and exalted forever and ever.
Ani ma'amin, ani ma'amin, ani ma'amin, ani ma'amin. בביאת המשיח, ואף על פי שיתמהמה, עם כל זה אני מאמין, ואף על פי שיתמהמה, עם כל זה אני מאמין.
The first candle. We kindle these lights in memory of the 6 million Jews murdered by the Nazis and their collaborators. May the memory of the righteous be for a blessing. Zichronam livracha. The second candle.
אשרי הגפרור שנשרף והצית להבות, אשרי הלהבה שבערה בסתרי לבבות, אשרי הלבבות שידעו לחדול בכבוד, אשרי הגפרור שנשרף והצית להבות.
Blessed is the match consumed in kindling flame. Blessed is the flame that burns in the secret fastness of the heart. Blessed is the heart with the strength to stop its beating for honor's sake. Blessed is the match consumed in kindling flame.
The third candle.
To light a candle there, or even a match, would have brought, we would assemble in the darkness. To light a candle there, or even a match, would have brought immediate disaster upon us. We spoke about matters of the spirit and eternal questions, about God, about Jews in the world, about the eternity of Israel. In the midst of the darkness, I sensed light in the unlit room, the light of Torah.
The fourth candle.
It was the cold winter of 1944, and although we had nothing like calendars, my father, who was my fellow prisoner there, took me and some of our friends to a corner in our barrack. He announced that it was the eve of Hanukkah, produced a curious shaped clay ball, and began to light a wick immersed in his precious but now melted margarine ration. Before he could recite the first blessing, I protested at the waste of food. He looked at me, then at the lamp, and finally said, "You and I have seen that it is possible to live up to 3 weeks without food. We once lived almost 3 days without water, but you cannot live properly for 3 minutes without hope." Hugo Grimm.
The fifth candle.
I believe in the sun, even when it is not shining. I believe in love, even when feeling it not. I believe in God, even when God is silent. Found in a cellar wall in Cologne, Germany, written by a person hiding from the Nazis.
The sixth candle.
History is a history of nobility of the soul, of human dignity. It is a history we have recourse to when attack and calamity befall us. God has led our ancestors from generation to generation. God will guide us and our children's children through these days. We stand before God, strengthened by God's commandment that we fulfill. We bow before God and stand erect before humanity. We worship God and remain firm in all vicissitudes. Humbly we trust in God, and our path lies clear before us. We see our future, by Leo Beck.
This year, in addition to our special Temple Beth Israel Shoah candelabra, we're grateful and appreciative to our TBI Brotherhood for introducing us as a congregation to the Yellow Candle Project. Many of you have picked up and have in your homes a yellow candle along with a card with a child's name on it. So if you have it, you can light it now. I'm lighting this yellow candle in memory of Grisha Koval of Bobrisk, who perished at Bobrisk in 1941 at the age of 4.
Let us rise. Ilmale rachamim shochin b'meromim hamtzi menucha nechona kanfei hashchina במעלות קדושים וטהורים כזוהר הרקיע מזהירים את נשמות 6 מיליון אחינו ואחיותינו שנהרגו על קידוש השם בעל הרחמים יסתירים בסתר כנפיו לעולמים ויצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתם Adonai hu nachalatam v'anuchu b'shalom al mishkavam v'nomar Amen.
Fully compassionate God on high, to our 6 million brothers and sisters murdered because they were Jews, grant clear and certain rest with you in the lofty heights of the sacred and pure, whose brightness shines like the very glow of heaven. Source of mercy, forever enfold them in the embrace of your wings, secure their souls in eternity. Adonai, they are yours. They will rest in peace. Amen. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah. V'yalma divra chirutei v'yamlich malchutei. B'chayei chon v'yomei chon v'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael. B'agalau v'zman kariv. V'imru, Amen. Yehei Shemei Rabba Mevorach Le'olam Yomei Olmaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yithadar v'yitalev v'yithalal Shemei D'Kudsha B'richu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata. Tushbechata v'nechemata. Damiran bi'alma v'imru, Amen. Yehei shalama rabba min shemaya v'chayim, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'imru, Amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'imru, Amen.
V'imru v'imru, v'imru, amen.
Friends, each year we're aware once again of the enormity of the experience our people endured during World War II, the enormity of the Shoah and the heaviness that is almost too much to bear. So we have learned that if instead of trying to fathom it in its entirety, we focus each year on one small aspect of the experience, one small aspect of that which our ancestors endured, it gives us a better sense of connecting to our ancestors and beginning to understand the experience for our people. So this year, our focus is a film, which perhaps you've had the opportunity to see, but even if you hadn't, in a moment, we'll have a synopsis of it. A film called The Invisibles, of people who lived out the war, Jews in Berlin, young people essentially hiding in plain sight and being helped by others. We're very pleased that our own temple member, Lillian Gerstner, is here to teach us about the film and to lead a conversation about it. Lillian, as you may know, worked for many, many years at the Holocaust Museum here in Skokie, and also serves as a film advisor to the JCC Film Festival, particularly about films having to do with the Shoah. So I turn it over now to Lillian to lead us in the educational part of our program this evening.
Thank you, Rabbi, and good evening, friends. I don't know how many of you have had the opportunity to see the film. I'm trying to see as many of you at the same time on the screen as I can, so perhaps you can indicate for me if you have seen the film. Please do so by raising your hands. Looking on screen number 1, let's see screen number 2. There are some more hands here and then more hands there. And not all of you are sharing your video, so I'm going to have to use my imagination. Okay, thank you. As Rabbi indicated, I spent, as a matter of fact, by the time I retired from the Illinois Holocaust Museum, between my years as a staff member and the years preceding that as a volunteer, when it was a very small storefront operation on Main Street, I had spent a total of 35 years with the Holocaust Museum. So this is a subject that became my profession, but as some of you know, but some of you may not know, it is also my own family history. As Rabbi mentioned, I assisted the JCC Chicago Film Festival for several years in reviewing films and helping them make determinations as to what films they ought to show for the festival. And in particular, my focus was on films related to the Holocaust. As such, several years ago, when The Invisibles was first available in the US, it was one of the suggestions that the film festival group was reviewing. And when I first saw it, I was utterly captivated by it. Not only does it illuminate a particular subtopic of the Holocaust, but it strikes a very, very significant chord with me because my late mother was a native of Berlin. And she indeed was one of those invisibles for the concluding years of the war. So when I watched this film, I did so not only as a Holocaust educator, but as the daughter of someone whose story might have been told had that director known about my mother and had my mother still been alive when he chose to make this film. At the risk of confusing those of you who have not seen the film, and there were many hands that not raised. The film, some of this will resonate, I hope, and some of it may actually be new to you. I consulted a variety of resources, and I hope that what I'm going to be sharing with you will be of interest. The film, its title in German is Die Unsichtbaren. Wir wollen leben. As the invisibles. But as a matter of fact, I think the word in German, and I could consult with Ernie, who is my other native German speaker here, Unsichtbaren is invisible, singular, when you use it the way it's used in the title of the film. But I think they made it plural, the better for English audiences to understand. The English language release did not include the subtitle, which I think is extraordinarily significant. We Want to Live. It's a 2017 German docudrama directed by and co-written by a gentleman named Klaus Revel. The film presents the experience of 4 teenagers who survived the Holocaust by going into hiding in Berlin during World War II. The film interweaves personal interviews, dramatic reenactment, archival footage, and narration. Joseph Goebbels, propaganda minister for the Reich, declared in May of 1943 that Berlin was Judenfrei, free of Jews. He was inaccurate. Approximately 7,000 Jews went into hiding in Berlin. They and their supporters were being hunted at all times by the Gestapo and those who served as the Gestapo's minions, to assist those who preferred to be invisible. The Gestapo also used Jewish informants who were pressured to cooperate. Those people attempting to hide faced many difficulties. They needed to shelter in a place where every person was required to be registered. So to be unregistered came with great danger. The food situation for everyone was precarious. Food cards were used because of food rationing. And if you were to remain invisible, you had no ration cards assigned to you and had to make do with whatever food was procured by the people. For young men, unless they appeared in public in uniform, they were suspect. All young men of a certain age needed to be appearing in uniform, for if you were not in uniform, who were you? Luggage could be controlled, so if you appeared carrying more than a briefcase or a purse, you were suspicious. Towards the end of the war, when Berlin was being heavily bombed, and the arrival of the Soviet army also carried dangers. In spite of that, somewhere between 1,500 and 1,700 Jews who had been hidden in plain Berlin survived the war. This film specifically recounts the struggle of 4 individuals: Shoma Schönhaus, Hanni Levy, Eugen Friede, and Ruth Arndt Gumpel. Their attempts and their struggle to survive their persecution as Jews in Berlin between the years 1942 and 1945. Their individual situations are reenacted, and in interspersed interview segments, they recollect and comment on their experiences. Their survival is attributed to resilience, luck, help from others, and youthful exuberance. Their saviors come from different walks of life, including ordinary German citizens, communists, Christians, as well as people working within the Nazi hierarchy. Their helpers put themselves at great risk should their activities be known to the Gestapo, who work at all times with a network of spies and informants. The film presents a variety of themes such as isolation, hunger, separation, rescue, and youth. We learn about these people both in these dramatic reenactments as well as from their interview excerpts. What I feel makes the film a little difficult to understand is that there's not a strenuous framework or context of historical timeline provided. And because the stories are interspersed, we flip from one person's situation to the next person's situation to the next, and so forth. Had the director chosen to take, for instance, the story of Hani and tell it from beginning to end, we would have a very clear understanding of it. But because we switch from Hani to Shoma to Eugen to Ruth, as clear a picture, and you have to pay very close attention to string all of the incidents together. But I also can understand from a director's standpoint why he might have chosen to do so. Although these four individuals never meet during those years of hiding in Berlin, what is happening to them and what is happening around them is happening at the same time. So in that case, it makes sense to present their episodes in linear order, interspersed with one another. I'd like to start by telling you a little bit about how we meet each one of these four individuals. When the film begins, in one of the rare occasions when a little bit of historical information is provided, and it happens at only a few points throughout the film, we are told that in October 1941, the deportation of Europe's Jews began. However, 7,000 of them resisted and went into hiding in Berlin. The German tauschen in Berlin unter, to go under in Berlin. We first meet a young man named Shoma Schönhaus, who went into hiding in 1942 at the age of 20. It is the opening scene of the film where we see him in looking through a drawer, finding a letter his parents had received, ordering them to report to a deportation center. He's horrified by this. Why had they kept this from him? And now they're forced to show up to this deportation center. For his good fortune, he has been a forced laborer in a machine gun factory, and he's considered to be a very, very model forced laborer, producing well above the number of barrels that other workers are doing. So he's very, very substantially important to this particular factory. And at the deportation center, when his name is called, and stand before the man, he points out that he is a valuable worker, and isn't there something to tell you that I am? And indeed, the factory has indicated that they wish this young man to stay and continue his forced labor. I'm using this term of forced labor, and I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with it. Forced labor, Zwangsarbeit, was slave labor. Everyone in Berlin was put into some form of work contributing to the war effort. There was no choice about it. And as a matter of fact, you welcomed the opportunity to perform the forced labor because that indeed entitled you to remain registered, to remain off deportation lists, and entitled you to food rations. So Shoma, that he's excused. His parents are not so fortunate, and we see a very tearful, heartfelt farewell between him and particularly his mother. His mother is very emotional. And at the last minute, she hands him a postcard that she implores him to mail. It's something she wanted to send to her coworkers. She had the chance to do so and forgot to mail it. And at the last, she asks him to please, remember to do this and to respect her wishes and promise that he will do this. So that's how we meet Shoma. We're next introduced to a young lady named Ruth. Her maiden name is Arndt. Ruth Arndt. She goes into hiding in 1942 at age 20. When we first meet her, she's in someone's apartment with a number of other young people, and they're actually having a good time. They're dancing, and the narration indicates that they're dancing to American music, and this is something they greatly enjoy. But during this scene, her brother pulls her aside and points out that two more of his friends have arranged to disappear. And should they once again talk to their parents about finding out if there's some way the Arndt family, might possibly go into hiding. We are then shown a scene where a woman named Frau Gere, a Mrs. Gere, offers to assist the family. Ruth's father, Dr. Arndt, apparently saved this woman's daughter, and she is eternally grateful to him and offers to do whatever she can to help the family. Indeed, saying that the doctor could stay with her and her husband in a secret room that they have constructed, and that she would also help find hiding places for the doctor's wife and Ruth's brother. We then meet a young man named Eugen Friede. He goes into hiding as a 16-year-old in 1943. We learn that his stepfather is not Jewish, which has an impact on his situation. And the scene in which we are introduced to Eugen, he is riding on a bus. And the conductor of the bus challenges him, saying, "What are you doing here? I can't believe you have the audacity to ride the bus," because Eugen is riding the bus and he's wearing his yellow star, his Jewish star, on his jacket, as he's supposed to, as he's ordered to do. Eugen shows the conductor a permit that he has. The permit indicates that he's allowed to ride the bus because his place of work is more than 7 kilometers distant from where he lives. So the conductor reluctantly agrees that the permit says you can be on the bus, but points out that the permit says nothing about being allowed to sit. So Eugen stands and the conductor moves off. We see an older woman handing Eugen something, and the narration indicates to us that sometimes people would give him things out of sympathy and kindness and perhaps a little bit of understanding, but that clearly most of the Germans in the general population could not fully understand the extent to which the anti-Jewish laws impacted the Jews. Did every German understand that Jews, in addition to wearing the yellow star, could no longer own bicycles, could no longer have a radio, could no longer have a pet? These things were denied to them. When Eugen gets off the bus, he is stopped by someone who's probably the Gestapo. And this man tears the star from Eugen's coat, saying it wasn't properly attached. He then quizzes Eugen as to his name. And when Eugen says Eugen Friede, the Gestapo man says Eugen Israel Friede, reminding him that his full name has a middle name, Israel, just as all Jewish women were given the middle name of Sarah, Jewish men had to take the middle name of Israel. And this appeared on all of their documents. When Eugen comes home, that particular incident of having been stopped instills a great deal of fear and agitation into his non-Jewish stepfather, who then insists that they now need to find a way for him to live somewhere else. Then giving us one little glimpse of historical note. On the screen, we are shown that on the 27th of February, 1943, the Fabriksaktion, the factory action, took place. And this was an attempt by the Gestapo to be the final roundup of the remaining Jews in Berlin. The Gestapo went to all factories where forced laborers were working and rounded up the Jews and subsequently deported them. It's on the heels of this historical note that we're introduced to our fourth character, our fourth survivor, Hani Levy, name Rosenberg. She goes into hiding in the year 1993 at the age of 17, and we are told that she's an orphan. When the family who took her in after her mother's death was deported, she's alone, but manages to remain in the apartment where they had been living. She's not on the register. A Gestapo raid takes place. That's the first thing we see happening. She avoids detection during the raid, but knows that she better leave because it's no longer going to be safe there. She knows she's going to be suspicious if she carries anything more than her purse, so that's all she takes with her. She manages to find a friend of her mother's where she's able to stay for a few nights. That gives us a little bit of a start. I'd be interested, for those of you who saw the film, if you'd like to share something, if you have a strong impression, something that was very memorable about the film, or if you might have a question or something, a comment you want to make about it, you'd let us know. Rabbi's looking for raised hands. I'm looking for raised hands. Someone want to share something, ask something?
Barbara?
If you would please remind me again if you saw the film.
I got about halfway through it, and it's just very powerful, and I certainly intend to watch the other half. But I'm curious to know, of the 1,500 survivors, how percentage-wise, how many stayed in Berlin? How many went to Israel? How many went elsewhere? Do you happen to know that?
That's an excellent question, Barbara. I wish I had that kind of data. I do not. I can only tell you based on personal knowledge in the case of my mother, in the case of my parents, who met in Berlin after the war in a displaced persons camp in a district called Schlachtensee. It was in the American sector. And once they determined that they were one another's beschert and got married and moved out of the camp, they did not want to stay in Germany. Introduced to us in The Invisibles, they went all different places as well. Although one of them moved away and then eventually returned to Germany. One of them ended up in Canada, one of them ended up in France, one in Switzerland, I believe.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Somebody else? Anybody else? If not, I've got lots of pages.
Lil, I'm wondering if you could share with us if this was a story that has been told through the museum, or is this a story that is commonly told through, because I saw the film when it was aired for the festival, and I had never heard the story before. And it's always amazing to me. I'm now reading the book about the Jewish women in the resistance that was featured in the New York Times 2 weeks ago. A light read of 600 pages. But each time I read one of these stories that I had not yet heard, having grown up in the immediate post-Holocaust era, where all of my Jewish education centered around the Holocaust, it just is shocking to me how many stories are still yet to be told. So I'm just curious, is this a story that was something that Holocaust educators were aware of? And did the museum feature this story at any point?
Certainly, I think people in general who are acquainted with the subject matter of the Holocaust know that some people survived by being in hiding. But when you say being in hiding, what comes to mind is Anne Frank and her family in an attic. Not everyone is acquainted with those who hid in the way these people hid in Berlin, pretty much hiding in plain sight. One of the terms attributed, before Klaus Rehfeld came along and called them the invisible, they were with submarines. They managed to make it from point A to point B without being seen because the only thing above the surface was the hint of the periscope. So these people were aware of their surroundings, tried not to be obvious or call attention to themselves. I don't think I can say that the museum did anything specifically about this subject. We did show the film when it was part of the JCC Film Festival, but nothing more specific than that. Of the survivors I know in this general vicinity, some of them have similar experiences. In fact, Rabbi and I were talking about a TBI congregant who was from Berlin and survived in a fashion this, but it's not a common experience, as you know,
Right.
as can be understood. If there were 1,500 to 1,700, not a great many of them may have ended up in this vicinity.
There was some reference to it in The Zookeeper's Wife, which was about Warsaw.
Yes.
About these hairdressers that would dye the hair of Jewish women so that they wouldn't look swarthy or Semitic.
Yes.
And that was the first time I had heard, and there was it's like a secret underground of people who did that to help Jews pass.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. In this case, for those of you who've not seen the film, of the two women, Hani, who, as I described, is an orphan and ends up going to stay with a friend of her late mother's, who takes her to the hairdresser, and then subsequently, from time to time, gives her money to help her cover the expense of continuing to have her hair touched up. As I pointed out, yes, Rabbi.
So I was struck in watching the film that it was, I thought, so well done to portray four very different experiences. And in a way that was saying that there wasn't a typical way that people survived, but some of the people that are featured in the film essentially more or less looked out for themselves and just tried to find a way to survive. And yet one of them became a forger and was engaged in not only his own survival, but in helping other people and being part of a network to help other people. So the experiences of those who survived there is an atypical experience. Each one is unique, and I thought the filmmaker did a good job of bringing that out.
Absolutely, absolutely. The forger was Shoma, and he was quite adept at it, and that's what helped him survive. And as you point out, he helped others survive through his handiwork. He ended up writing a book about his experiences. It's called The Forger, and it's by Shoma, Cioma, Schönhaus, Scho umlaut Nhaus. It was translated into English. The other gentleman, Eugen Friede, also wrote an autobiography, but his is only available in German. What I wanted to mention is that although as I pointed out, their paths did not cross, these four, Shoma, Eugen, Ruth, and Hani, but there were some episodes that are shared with us in the film that are intersections, if you will, and quite frightening ones. Let's see. After a variety of places, Ruth ends up staying together with her girlfriend, Ellen. Her girlfriend, Ellen, is dating, and for a lark, if you will, Ellen says that they should get out. So they go to they go to the movie theater, they go to the cinema. And Ellen has crafted for them hats to which she has sewn a veil so that they can, in a way, pose as young war widows. If they look sad when people look at them, they can perhaps escape detection. So they go to the movie theater and they see a film. And after the film, they're returning. They're in the corridor. It looks like they're on their way to take the U-Bahn. And they walk past a woman and a man, and the woman calls out Ellen's name, but Ellen doesn't turn around. She doesn't want to acknowledge someone who has called her by her real name, because the real Ellen shouldn't be there. The person who calls out to her is a woman named Stella. Stella was a notorious informant for the Gestapo. Stella was a Jewish woman who was recruited by the Gestapo to unmask other Jews. Stella was willing to do this because the Gestapo promised her that it would keep her parents safe, kept finding and catching Jews. So Stella recognizes Ellen, but Ellen and Ruth keep walking. Several scenes later in the movie, there's another encounter with Stella, but this time is with Shoma, the young man who's an expert forger, and he's thrilled to see Stella. He's thrilled because they were schoolmates long ago, and he had a crush on her. He had a terrible crush on her, but she wouldn't give him the time of day. So when he's accosted by her one day while he's out and about on the Kurfürstendamm, and he invites her to go to a cafe, and he's flirting with her and she's flirting with him. And he says, perhaps you'd like to see my room. And on the way, she stops him. So apparently Stella had a little bit of a conscience. She stops him and says, don't you think you're making a mistake? And we cut from that dramatic reenactment of the scene to the interview segment with Shoma, with the survivor. And he recalls feeling that an angel must have intervened in his behalf, because when Stella walked away from him, he considered it a declaration of love, because she usually betrayed people. So even though Ruth and Shoma didn't meet, this commonality, this intersection, was with Stella. There's another such intersection when Shoma, his friend, finds them a perfect place to have a workshop, because a chauffeur who works at the Afghan embassy has rented it, and it can be their workshop, and they go to work there doing their forgeries and so forth. And another man is introduced. His name is Werner Scharf. He's an accomplished electrician who is retained, his services are retained by the Gestapo, who know he's Jewish, but because he's such a skilled electrician, they want his knowledge and his skills. Later in the film, Werner shows up at the same home where Eugen is being hidden, the Winklers. Werner Scharf shows up with his girlfriend, and they have escaped from Theresienstadt. This all actually happened, but to me, it's just probably an indication of the amount of research that this gentleman, Klaus Rehfel, did when seeking out people to use as the subjects on whom he focused in this film. He found commonalities among the stories. As many differences as there are some unusual commonalities as well. Now, some time ago, before I said I'd like to hear what you have to say, I promised you that I had a little more information. I think we'll come close to concluding when I share this with you. Of those 7,000 Jews, as I mentioned, somewhere between 1,500 and 1,700 survived. Many of the people who helped them survived were named righteous among the nations at Yad Vashem. And this is information listed in the film as we head toward the closing of the film. Among the people recognized as righteous among the nations were Ani and Max Gere, the couple whose daughter, Dr. Arndt, Ruth's father, had saved. Max and Clara Köhler. Max Köhler ran the factory where Ellen and Ruth and Bruno and Ruth's brother were able to be saved. Also named as righteous among the nations, Victoria Kolzer. This is Hani's story. Mrs. Kolzer is the box office lady, the ticket taker at a movie theater, and she befriends Hani and helps shelter her for the duration of the war. I mentioned the Winklers. The Winklers are a couple who sheltered Eugen, recognized as righteous among the nations. The sisters who took Hani in after she became homeless after the Gestapo raid, women named Elfriede and Greta Most, and Helena Jacobs, who worked with Dr. Kaufman, who was the gentleman who found all the forgery work, gave much of the information about them appears on the Yad Vashem website. I don't know how many of you spend a lot of time exploring the Yad Vashem website, but in the Righteous Among the Nations portion of the Yad Vashem website, you can read the biographies of the various righteous, and there are many photographs other documents attached. That's on the Yad Vashem website in their righteous database. At the conclusion of the film, we're told that Hani, who was identified from a Red Cross list by one of her relatives, went to live in Paris, where she remained from 1946. She became a great-grandmother with a large family, and she died not that long ago in October of 2019. Eugen survived the last days of the war in Berlin. He emigrated to Canada, then returned to Germany, and lived in a town called Kronberg. He too became a great-grandfather. He died in October of 2018. There is a Shoah testimony that he gave. He participated in the Spielberg gathering of Holocaust testimonies. It is actually available online through the USC Shoah Foundation Visual History Archive. It's about an hour and 45 minutes long, but I must warn you, it is in German. So if you are able to understand German and want to watch his testimony, it is remarkable, particularly when he gets to the part describing his stay at the Winklers and how they became part of a resistance movement. Because when Werner Scharf showed up after escaping Theresienstadt, he convinced them that they couldn't just sit there and save one Jew. They needed to let Germans know what was going on. Ruth married Bruno in September of 1945 and emigrated to the US. They had 2 children, 5 grandchildren, and she passed away in 2012. She too gave Shoah Foundation testimony, as did her friend Ellen, who married Ruth's brother. Shoma managed to escape to Switzerland by bicycle, and he lived there until September 2015, leaving behind 4 children. What I could find very little about, and I wish I could find more information about it, perhaps someone who is more adept at Googling and searching the internet can locate this. There was an article following the 2017 premiere of the film in Germany. I located an article in a magazine called Aktuell. It's a magazine created for former Berliners and their descendants. And there was an interview with Hani, and she refers to meeting the film's director in 2008 and expresses regrets about the length of time it took between when he began to work on the film and when it was released. And she said, "We were portrayed by young, very talented actors who felt a responsibility toward us. They gave their best and they have my thanks for it. Unfortunately, it took 9 years before the film could finally reach the screens. 9 years full of obstacles placed in Klaus Refel's way. And it was only due to his unshakable faith in his project that all those difficulties could be overcome." When the film premiered, it was given a one-night showing at the Hamburg Film Festival, and then 2 nights later, its grand openings. Eugen was also alive and attended the Berlin premiere, but Shoma and Ruth had already passed away. Their family members represented him there. So I have no idea what was the delay. It was not simply a matter lodged as to this film being released.
So friends, on behalf of all of us, I want to express our thanks to Lillian, who clearly did a lot of research and also has such a wealth of background knowledge that really helped the film come alive even more for those those of you like me who saw the film now have a deeper appreciation for what it is, and those of you who have not yet seen it, I think are motivated to see it because we understand that by learning the stories of individuals, we then magnify it and understand that there are literally millions of these stories. Some of them, like the 4 stories in this film, have relatively happy endings in that the people survived, and some, alas, do not. But either way, these are the stories that belong to the heritage of our people, and we're grateful to have the opportunity to learn them, hear them, share them, and share our knowledge of them with others. So, Lillian, we thank you for sharing with us, and we thank all of you for coming and being with us for this evening of observance and of learning to mark this day of Yom HaShoah Ugevurah. Thank you all, and good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you, Lillian.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Lillian.
you, Lillian. That was wonderful.
My pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Very nice.
Marlon.